Hi, boys and girls. It's Teacher Kate, and welcome to Shawnee Presbyterian Church's Sunday School. I am so thrilled and honored that you are here with me today to come and learn more about Jesus and bring him closer into your heart. I'm going to read a story to you today from the book My Bible Friends. This is a new one. This is book 5. We haven't read any of the stories out of this book yet. The first 2 stories in this book are about Daniel, and next week I'll read you the second one, but this week I'm going to read you the one called Daniel and His Friends. It was noontime in the city of Jerusalem. The temple school for boys had been dismissed. Daniel and his 3 special friends were hurrying home to lunch when suddenly a trumpet sounded. Ta-ta-ta-tee, ta-ta-ta-tee, shrilled the trumpet. Who would you say your 3 best friends are? These are Daniel and his 3 best friends. It was the noontime call to prayer. 3 times a day, morning, noon, and at night, a priest came out of the temple porch and blew on a ram's horn trumpet. Ta-ta-ta-tee, ta-ta-ta-tee. It's time for prayers. Daniel turned about face towards the temple. His friend also turned about face towards the temple. All the people of Jerusalem stopped whatever they were doing and faced toward the temple. With heads bowed, they prayed to the God of heaven. At home, Daniel's mother served pulse for lunch. Pulse is a food like beans and vegetables, brown bread, berries, and dates. Daniel liked pulse. Pulse would make him grow tall. It would make him grow strong, and pulse would get him good grades in school. Do you have a special food, a healthy food that you like to eat that you know is going to help you grow strong and tall and smart? Well, for Daniel, it was a food called pulse. Daniel, his 3 friends, and all the people of Jerusalem felt safe in their city. For hadn't the city a high stone wall around it? And were there not strong gates in the wall with a watchtower above each gate where watchmen kept watch day and night? If Daniel listened, he could hear the watchman call, "First watch and all is well." And later, "Second watch and all's well." And still later, "Third watch and all's well." Did you guess it? But one day, all was not well. The watchman hurried out of the watchtower, blew a warning blast on his trumpet, and shouted, "An enemy approaches!" Quickly, the gates were shut and barred. Men mounted city walls. Boys climbed rooftops. Far away, so far that soldiers and camels looked like a line of creeping, crawling bugs, came the dread army, the feared army of Babylon. Closer and closer and closer the army came. You could just see the army of Babylon is coming. The army of Babylon pitched camp near Jerusalem. The soldiers built great battering ram machines and pushed them up beside the wall. Crash, crash, crash. All day long, the battering rams beat and battered the wall of Jerusalem. Crash, crash, crash. Finally, after many days, a part of the high stone wall gave way. Oh my goodness, this is terrible. The army of Babylon marched into Jerusalem. Some of the soldiers climbed the hill to the temple. They took away the temple's golden vessels, as the king of Babylon had commanded them to do. Some soldiers stood guard, while other soldiers took men and boys prisoner. They took Daniel and his 3 friends. Oh no, this is really terrible. Look at Daniel and his 3 friends are being led out of his city. The army marched the prisoners toward Babylon. Soldiers on camels led the way. Then came the prisoners chained together. Next, donkeys bearing the golden vessels, then more soldiers. For days and days, the procession marched across the hot, sandy desert. Daniel's sandals wore out, and his friends' sandals wore out too. The hot sand burned their feet. They were thirsty, they were tired, but on and on they had to march until they came to Babylon. The king of Babylon sat on his royal throne while soldiers paraded the prisoners before him. Said the king to the captain of the army, "Choose boys from among the prisoners, goodly boys. Give them food from my table to eat, and give them of my wine to drink. And they shall go to school for 3 years to learn the wisdom of Babylon." Daniel and his 3 friends were chosen. Prince Melzar was given charge over all the boys. Oh, I was worried they might be chosen, and I'm worried what will happen to them. That evening, Daniel and his friends talked together. "We cannot eat the king's food," said Daniel. "It has been offered to idols. And besides, the king's food is not the best food for boys. Neither can we drink the king's wine." "What shall we do?" the boys asked one another. They just didn't know what to do. Then Daniel thought of a plan. "Let's ask Prince Melzar to give us pulse to eat and water to drink instead of the king's food and wine." "That's a good idea," agreed Daniel's 3 friends. Daniel and his friends humbly went to Prince Melzar. They bowed politely, then asked for pulse and water instead of the king's food and wine. Melzar shook his head. "No, if the king should see you look thinner than the other boys and learn that I had given you pulse and water, he will definitely punish me very harshly." "Please try us for 10 days, begged Daniel. So Melzar agreed to give them pulse and water for 10 days. "Then we shall see," he said. Although Daniel and his friends were far from home, there was no sound of a ram's horn trumpet to remind them they did not forget to pray to God. Morning, noon, and night, Daniel opened his window toward the temple back to Jerusalem and prayed to the God of heaven. He asked God to bless the pulse and water and to let it make them strong, so that Melzar might know that pulse and water were better for boys than the king's food and wine. Then the 10 days had passed. Prince Melzar called all the boys before him. He looked at their faces. He felt their arms. He found that Daniel and his friends were fairer and fatter than the boys who ate the king's food and drank the king's wine. So ever after, during the 3 years of school, Prince Melzar gave Daniel and his friends pulse to eat and water to drink. 1, 2, 3 years passed quickly by. School was over for Daniel and his friends. They had grown taller. Had they grown wiser? The king himself would test them. Daniel and his friends, dressed in clean clothes with hair combed and sandals polished, and stood before the king of Babylon. The king asked them question after question, and lo, the king found that Daniel and his 3 friends, 10 times wiser than all the wise men of Babylon. And that's the end of the story for this week, Daniel and his friends. So, boys and girls, what can we learn from the story this week? What is a lesson that we might be able to apply to our own lives. Can you think of one from the story? I was really impressed when the boys stood up and said, we can't drink and eat that food and wine because it's been offered to fake idols and it's not been blessed by God, and we don't want to eat that. And so they found a good solution, didn't they? They didn't want to get anyone in trouble, but they stood up for what they believed. And I think that's one of the lessons you can take away from this story, is that sometimes it's hard to stand up for what we believe in, but we should never do something that we know is against our beliefs just because we want to fit in or be popular. Always stand up for what you believe in. And I think Daniel and his friends did that, and it paid off for them. But they did it in a way that wasn't disrespectful and didn't get anyone else in trouble, which I think was also really important. So, boys and girls, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I am looking forward to seeing you next week for our next story. Take care. Bye-bye. And remember to always be kind, friendly, and helpful. And Jesus loves you just the way you are. You're perfect, just how you are. Bye-bye.